What is this lost tradition called Gnosticism? This ancient art of inner knowing and blissful transcendence. Those mystical teachings of individuality that brought the wrath of the Church and other institutions across history. Is it possible to learn about the Gnostic secrets of primordial goddesses we can still call upon? Heed their warnings about alien beings keeping us in bondage in a terrible simulation? And feeding upon us. Can we discover today and use their timeless rituals that caused expanded consciousness and astral flights? That unleashes our inner light and divinity? And the original teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene that promised a world of dignity and freedom for all living beings? Yes, you can, and so much more. From the Gospel of Thomas to the Gospel of Mary, from the teachings of Simon Magus to the mystery of Abraxas to the revelations of Sophia, it's now available in one course. Enter the Virtual Alexandria Academy. Know the unknown and the reality beyond reality.
Welcome to Aeon Byte, and yes, happy heresies, as I always like to say. My name is Miguel Connor, and I am so happy to see you. You're going to do so many wonders, and you are going to thrive here at the Virtual Alexandria. And some of you may be saying, why am I doing that? The intro video for the promo for the Virtual Alexandria Academy. And the reason is I am extending it. I am extending the offer for 50% off. Just use code Elvis. Why? It's been a big success. And last week with the holiday weekend and so forth, many of you were traveling or were out and you couldn't get to it. So you've been emailing Miguel, can you please extend it? So I am extending the Virtual Alexandria Academy. Check it out on the show notes. And the feedback has been very positive for it. You get the entire voyage from ancient Gnostics to modern Gnostics, whether it's Philip K. Dick or Carl Jung and others. You get the whole shebang, UFOs, Mary Magdalene, Simon Magus, and all that. So thought I'd let you know. And yes, for those of you who celebrated, I hope you had a good holiday weekend and you're ready to enjoy the rest of the year and the rest of the season. So today I am very excited to be joined by Dr. Tess Lawrie to discuss a book I really enjoy, and it was quite an adventure and quite an eye-opener, but also full of wisdom, and that is Game of Trust, the Lawrie Files. Dr. Tess Lawrie and the I Ching, my favorite form of divination these days. Tess, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Miguel. It's such a pleasure and honor to be with you because I do watch your show from time to time. And I never imagined I would be on it. I have got my sort of official background because I thought I could introduce people. I thought your viewers probably wouldn't actually know much about what I do or about the World Council for Health or the Better Way movement, which is what this logo represents. So although I'm here speaking in my personal capacity today as the author, I just thought I had the opportunity to introduce your audience to these logos as well.
No, wonderful. Please share as much as you would like. We are here to promote our guests and their viewpoints. We have varied viewpoints, worldviews, ideas, and that's what makes a better civilization, when we can hear each other out, introduce things, let people make up their minds, and we go from there. And that's always been, you might say, the selling point or the ethos of this show. With us too, we are always glad to be joined by my friend and wingman, and that is Graham Pong. Graham, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very good today. I'm looking forward to hearing from Tess about her war in the trenches, because I watched the dress rehearsal in November 2019. So I checked out in 2020 and I didn't need to watch the full production. So looking forward to hearing from her.
Yeah, that's always the argument. Things happen way before we think they happened. It's just the official narrative. Somebody sets a line. Yeah, the history is written by the victors, as they say, but I don't think they have won. And I think Tessa showed us that there is so much fight within us. I think, as I mentioned, Tess, I was watching some of your videos while enjoying your book. And there was one podcast you were in, and you were talking about how do you fight tyranny. And you said, well, you don't fight it, you don't get angry at it. It reminded me very much of Philip K. Dick and his famous line, to fight the empires, to be infected by its derangement. Or, we become what we fight. Or Nietzsche, the idea that if you stare into the abyss, it will stare back at you. But you said something really beautiful, that we can create our way out of a tyranny, right? That is the way out. That has always been the way out. That has been victory.
Yeah, I think I remember that. I think it's we can't comply our way out of tyranny, and we can't
That's right.
react our way out of tyranny. We have to create our way out of tyranny, and we're hugely creative. So there is opportunity here for a bit of fun as well.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
this
There's always a solution. Yeah, we have to see there is always a solution that we aren't seeing, and there is always a way that we can, share more light and break our way through the darkness. So I think we're on the same page. But first, tell the audience a little bit about yourself before. Well, it is included in your book, but tell us, who is Tess Lawrie?
Well, I'm a South African originally, South African doctor, and I moved. I was specializing in obstetrics and gynecology when I lost my first baby, and it's sent me into the direction of doing medical research and evidence synthesis, which is providing proof for clinical practice. And I started working as an external consultant to the World Health Organization. I set up my own research consultancy called the Evidence-Based Medicine Consultancy Limited, and moved to the UK with my family. After we had there was another thing that really sent us. There was distressing. We had a sort of home invasion in South Africa, and it was, really quite horrific. And so we, took the family off to the United Kingdom, thinking it would be safe there. But then, obviously, one became aware that there are much more insidious dangers in these in the very industrialized or developed world. And so the brainwashing and rat race and all of that kind of got to me a bit, and I realized that the world is pretty is not what one thinks. And so I sort of woke up then, I would say around about 2017 or so, just thinking this is more like hell than heaven, and people seem to suffer a lot. And so I started questioning things then and went on my own sort of journey, but I was still in the rat race and working as a consultant to the World Health Organization when the health crisis of 2020 began. And as a research consultant and a guideline methodologist, that's what it's what they call it when you help to write these clinical practice guidelines. I could see they didn't have the evidence to call a pandemic, and they didn't have the evidence to support the interventions that they were recommending. And I wasn't in the COVID team as such. I was in other. I was in the reproductive health teams, so I didn't really have any influence in the policies that were being rolled out, but I could see what was happening and obviously alarmed. And then I had an opportunity when to do the evidence synthesis on a generic medicine that's been used as an antiparasitic called IVERMECTIN, and
We'll
it
call
got
it
me
that.
seriously censored ever since.
Yeah.
So I could apply my trade to that, and there was clearly enough evidence to use this old medicine, and so there was no justification for using experimental genetic therapies, and certainly just from using my experience and looking at the existing literature, there wasn't the evidence to support the use of those injections. And so the journey began, because I had to, and the book basically starts at the point where I had a meeting with the guy who was hired to do the evidence synthesis on the IV medicine, which costs 3 cents a tablet, so it was very, very inexpensive, and it has a great shelf life and could be posted to everyone who needed it, if there was really a real pandemic. And I recorded the meeting, and he sort of let on in that meeting that there were other forces at play, and he wasn't in control of the conclusions. There were other influences, and so I realized what we were up against, and then a kind of strategic game began. And so the book is about 2021, and the strategic game, you could say, that led to me basically stepping away from everything I had known before, and my work and income and everything, to help reveal this deception, which amazingly is still being upheld and perpetrated, and it ultimately led to the founding of the World Council for Health in September 2021. So many people wouldn't even know, I would think, your viewers, because we've been so censored, that we exist. But we are a grassroots organization, and made up of many, many people around the world now, who are standing up for health and sovereignty. And in September 2021, we launched with an at-home treatment guide for the COVID crisis symptoms, as well as a cease and desist notice for the injections. So we were the first organization to really come out and say these things have to be stopped. And we've still been doing that, but now really more focused on empowering people to step away from fear, take control of themselves and their sovereignty, and create the new.
Thanks for sharing that. Yes, and for the audience, if you go to her website or her Substack, she does have the Zoom video with a certain doctor. Again, when it started, and she's talking about Ivor and everything else, and it's quite an eye-opening video. Another very fascinating videos that shows her journey. So check it out too. A Dr. Hill, who appears many times in the book, sort of your shadow self, sometimes I like to say. But what before we get into the research and more of the science, let's talk about the metaphysics. The I Ching, of course, is your co-author. Each chapter has the readings, and of course I know them all so well. When did you discover the I Ching, the Book of Changes, and how did it help you navigate these very chaotic times?
Well, I discovered it early in 2020, actually. I'd been working on a series of reviews on brain tumors. It was 5 reviews over 3 years, and I was coming to the end of that. And the guy that I played squash with, he said, "Oh, there's this eccentric woman at the top of my building. You should come and meet her. She's got a cosmic blueprint of the brain." So I thought, well, that sounds very interesting. I'll go and visit this woman. I had no idea who she was, but anyway, I'd walked in the door. She lives in this sort of massive concrete block right at the top, and has this glass penthouse on the top. Anyway, I walked in, and she said, "Oh, lovely to see you. You know, throw these coins," sort of thing. And she give me your date of birth and throw these coins. And I said, "Oh no, I'm just coming to hear about your blueprint of the brain." And she said, "No, I don't. You know, I'm not going to speak to anyone until you've done this." And her name is Chrissy Philp, and we are great friends now. Anyway, I threw the coins, and the coins basically said, you know, it was for the I Ching. And what it told me really resonated with me, because it reflected that there was some amends I needed to make in my own personal life. And so that made me think, gosh, I better get the book, because literally spoke so clearly to me. And so that sort of started me on the journey using it, but I wasn't using it that much, you know, certainly not in 2021. I do use it quite a lot now, because I find it so very useful and accurate, and certainly for the book, you know, when I sat down to write a book about 2021 and how the World Council for Health was formed and the Better Way movement began, I thought, I didn't feel very excited about doing it. You know, I thought might be a bit dull for me just to sit down and write what happened. And also, you know, it felt like it needed some outside perspective input. And then I thought, well, why don't I'd write it as an experiment, so a scientific experiment, really, between science and wisdom. You know, can this ancient book, can these ancient authors actually comment, make relevant observations that resonate not only with me, but with the reader or people who knew the story at the time? Because, of course, the book involves a number of incidents and events and people who contributed to the formation of World Council for Health, because they did terrible things, or they did nothing at all, or they did great things, you know. So and I was able to, so I used the I Ching to explore their conduct and the, you know, or the outcomes of certain events and incidents, or commentary on certain events and incidents, to see if it resonated with me. And I know Carl Jung used the I Ching a lot, and he said, well, it resonates with the psyche of the inquirer. But what I have explored further, I believe, which I think adds to the body of evidence now on the I Ching, to put it in a scientific sort of terminology, is that I feel what I've done shows that it could potentially not just resonate with the psyche of the inquirer, but of the broader psyche, of the psyche of other people. And that's what I'm interested to hear from people who do know the certain incidents and events, to see whether indeed it does resonate and it makes sense. Obviously I am getting some feedback already, with people saying, you know that was really, it's really amazing what it said there and what it said there. I mean, I'm sure you saw that I even asked about John F. Kennedy. You know, there's certain things that and it just was so accurate. I mean, to the point where when I asked about ivermectin, and you know, what did it think about ivermectin, or any comment on ivermectin, and it said, and I got something like, you know, about an evil element has wormed its way in, and it needs to be treated. It needs to be addressed early rather than late, which was exactly what we were suggesting, that IV it should be used early with symptoms, and not left, and people shouldn't be left, you know, suffering, turning blue, and then, you know, being sent to hospital.
Yes, thanks for sharing that. I agree. I use it too so much. I have friends use it for me because I know my ego. You know, sometimes the oracle will say, "Stop trying to draw until you get the right answer." 'Cause we're human, right? We want to plow, and we want to hear what we want to hear, so that we can live our deluded deluded lives instead of listening to our higher selves. And yeah, like you said, Carl Jung used it. As I mentioned too, Philip K. Dick, who's award-winning Man in the High Castle, made into a very popular television series. He used the I Ching for every character and every one of the decisions, and it's one of his best novels. So it's I can't, and of course, to each his own. I mean, that's me. My wife likes the tarot. Others have different divination systems. So, but again, to really, as a friend of mine said, to smile at your unconscious and have your unconscious smile at you, to get deep into the primordial unconscious places where the archetypes live. These are great tools. I hope I'm not. And you also share a lot of your other ideas, which are also very esoteric. Again, your book is scientific. You show the data, the studies, but you also discuss perhaps we live in a simulation. You quote a past guest of mine, Howdy Makowski, whose book I love, and you think, yeah, this could be a simulation. As a Taoist once told me, well, yeah, the I Ching is the code of the universe. What did you think it was? This is the code that sustains the entire universe.
Yeah, actually, I want to pick up on something you said earlier also about, how it's you use it and you almost think you're going to get an answer. You think you know what the answer is, and then you get something completely, like you get told off. You think you think you've done something great, and then you get told off and put in your place. And likewise, it does the opposite as well. You can think that you've really messed up, and it sort of comes with some really supportive commentary. So it really does become a friend, and I have come to think that it is one's broader consciousness. If one considers we are much bigger than what we are, and we're squished into these bodies as almost like a fragment of our bigger consciousness. It feels like a way of accessing the consciousness that they're trying to separate us from. So even if they're putting all this muck in the air and the frequencies and the satellites and all of that, even if they do all of that, it feels to me now, and this is what I will keep on exploring, that this is a way of bypassing it. It's almost like a cheat to reach that the consciousness that can give you the guidance, even if you're not sort of feeling it or getting it on meditation or all the other practices you might be feeling you ought to be doing. It feels like a great way of accessing it without doing all that other sorts of work, which is necessary, I'm sure. But
Yeah, I agree. As I tell people, they're talking about the demiurge archons, the powers that be, the cabal. It's with you. You've been programmed. You have trauma, so you have the enemy is us. Starts with our ego, and Jung would say that until we start individuating, don't try to save the world, because that's where the battle really begins and ends. So, like you said, the I Ching provides an honest view of our unconscious, the world outside, and so forth. And of course, like you said, live a good life, live a spiritual life, and it'll all come together. And for medicine, I know I headed towards the end, but I wanted to ask you now. But for example, when you saw what Ivor could do pretty early here in the United States, I think it was like summer of 2021. It was kind of late, but in a funny way, my wife and I got some. And the funny thing is, we still have it in the drawer. Sometimes I'll open the drawer and I'll see, there's the horses there. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we have Ivor in our house. Because whenever we are sick, we still lean to what works for us. We make tea, elderberry, zinc, sunshine, and this is for the kids too. Or once in a while, we get a Z pack if, I got work to do and I'm just feeling. And it doesn't matter if it's COVID or just a regular cold, but that's what we do. But we have it because we wanted to try it out, but we just didn't. And then I was thinking, I wonder how much of this is placebo. Is my wife and I are so into elderberry and sunshine that that's what's going to get us as John Lennon through the night. What do you think? Do you think placebo must be still important and we should go back
Yeah.
to it more?
Look, World Council for Health really stands for natural health. So we're really for natural health. And you could argue that, IV comes from, it was found by Professor Satoshi Omura on a golf course in Japan. And that's what he was doing, was getting samples. And I actually visited him last year in Japan, and I went to his laboratory at the university. He was 88. He just turned 88, and he was still sort of doing his work. And he showed me where they were fermenting the IV. And in actual fact, it is a natural process. It's a fermentation of a bacteria, or bacterium. So you could argue that anything that comes from a pharmaceutical, that goes through a pharmaceutical process, could be contaminated in some way, either with any contaminants. So I agree with you. I don't use anything apart from the natural things and supplements and herbs and all that, and almost everything I learned as a medical doctor is pretty much useless to me. I mean, I could do a cesarean section if necessary, and I certainly love delivering babies, but all of the drugs and things I would prefer not to use. Having said that, what has been very interesting with IV, and we held in 2021, we were trying to make a big noise and a big, we were doing our best to really reach people with it. So we held a World IV MECTIN Day, and this year it's the 5th World World IV MECTIN Day. And so we've continued to raise awareness. And as we have, what has been amazing is just seeing the scope of this generic, easily manufactured medicine, because it's generic. Anyone can make it if you've got, you can apply you can apply, I suppose, for approval or something, but it doesn't reap in big profits by Merck. Merck originally had the patent. So it's quite clear that what I wanted to say is its scope of use is being extended to cancer, and so people are taking it for things like prostate cancer, and there are these groups on Telegram with looking at it for prostate cancer and combined with fenbendazole for all of these different cancers, and people are sort of advising one another, and it's sort of people-led research in a way, which is a really interesting new paradigm, where people are realizing they just have to take control of their health and do their own thing. And if you're using, generally speaking, safe old medicines that have relatively low risk, then you can explore these things for yourself.
Well said indeed. Yeah, Graham, what do you think? Do you have a question or anything on your end?
I was going to say, I'm kind of with Paracelsus, where the difference between medicine and poison is dosage and usage. It all depends on how much you're using and your intent. And I find this. I find this interesting. One of my father, he was a doctor, and one of the things we always talked about is the downfall of medicine was when it went from being a vocation to a profession and turned into an industry where profit was the motivation. And to me, that's that's a lot of what I'm hearing behind what Tess is saying, is that this is all like I learned back in the 70s, follow the money, and that leads you to where the problem lies. What do you think, Tess?
Yes, I think that's what Paracelsus says as well. And that the thing about anything is toxic at a certain dose. Well, I have had concerns about IVER, MECTIN, because the pushback was so severe. They really did not want people to be using it, and they went to extreme lengths to hide it from the public. At the same time, putting money into research for long-acting IV injections. And so, one of the things I do caution against in the book is that, IV injections are being developed, and potentially other formulations. And so, one needs to really just be cautious and not embrace anything. It's really best. The natural approach is really best. But ivy it's really an example, and it's a key to unlock the Pandora's box of the COVID crisis. It's a key because if you can see that they had something cheap, effective, and safe that they could have used instead of the injections, the whole thing just falls apart. And so the book itself, I feel, is accessible for people who, we've all been trying to reach people all these years, trying to help them see that there's been this deception, and I feel that the book can help people because it's a story, and it's got the evidence to support it, and it sort of takes people on the journey so that they can see the many ways in which they were lied to in that year, that got them doing things that they wouldn't ordinarily have done, because most people wouldn't just go and take an experimental injection or more than one. And they were gaslit and made fearful, coerced, really, in many instances too, to do so.
Yeah, it was quite a time. It almost feels like yesterday. I almost want to make sure I don't want to forget. I don't want to let go. And for those who might want to look at the data itself, would be your book, but you talk about the gold standard Ivor review that came out in 2021. Is that the one people should look at? Now, for example, Tess, in 2022, I went to Mexico for our first Astronosis conference, and I have a lot of Mexican friends and acquaintances. And in Mexico, they were telling me all the research said that Ivor was great. When I went there to Mexico, you could get it in vending machines. You would walk into the store and buy it. Even years later, a friend of mine will say, "Oh, I went to the doctor. I don't have coronavirus, but I have a cold, but he still gave me Ivor." It's part of the society for the healthcare society of Mexican culture now, and they use it all the time. So, but that's the Mexican studies. What studies would you recommend?
Well, we did a systematic review in 2021, and it was a really good review. It was, sort of according to this criteria and guidelines into how to do a good review. So it was a very good review, and we had, great statistician involved and consumer representatives and other doctors and systematic reviews. And we struggled to get it published, but eventually we did get it published in June 2021 in the American Journal of Therapeutics. And that review is if you go to the lauriefiles.com website, you'll find all the pieces of evidence. Part of the reason why I was pressured into writing the book was because I'm always being asked to support court cases for doctors and nurses and other health practitioners, and some who are taking the injection angle to court. So I just wanted to put together all of the exhibits that I have been using to support these court cases, so that they're widely available and people can see that. Also can see what evidence was available in 2021 that that showed that there wasn't sufficient evidence to support the policies and recommendations and interventions, and that and also to show that they had all the evidence that they needed to stop the interventions once they were shown to be harmful. So it was to show that all of that information was available in 2021. And what was I think I've just lost my train of thought.
No. Yeah. I mean, it was about studies were the research, but yeah, tell the audience you have it all on your
yes,
website.
you can find it all on the website, Laurie Files. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there was so much. There are hundreds of studies on Ivy. So so you really so that's why the review is the simplest way of accessing a conclusion which says it wasn't sort of an excessive conclusion. It just said this would probably have a really big impact on deaths from the pandemic, you know. So it's sort of a no-brainer. You could use it. I mean, we didn't say you can use it. It was just leave it up to people to make up their own minds, you know.
That's it. Yeah, do your research, make up your own mind. It's your body, it's your life, and live as healthy as possible. And again, you saw this very early before others. You looked at the data. You sent Boris Johnson a video, a personal video, making your case. Again, you were banging the drum. And how did you keep yourself mentally positive? Because you went through a lot of criticism, a lot of roadblocks. You were investigated after a conference. I mean, when I was reading your book, I was like, God, I wonder how did you keep yourself with strong spirits, or, you know, keep going, you know, taking that next step, the old Winston Churchill, when you're in hell, keep going, right? Just
Yeah. When you realize that everything you've been told is a lie,
Mhm.
it actually look, either you're gonna say, "Oh my goodness, I can't go on," or you're gonna be empowered by it. And so I've been empowered by this information that everything we've been told is a lie, and so one can't. It feels like it seems to be opening up a lot of creativity. You know, you realize, gosh, I don't need to do that, and I don't need to do things I ought to do or should do or whatever. I can actually, um, you know, make up my own mind. The more I sort of tuned into my intuition, and didn't do what, you know, others, because on the way, you know, there were other people in the freedom movement who said, "Oh, you can't say that. Oh, you can't say that." And, you know, the more one just sort of said, "Well, this feels right, and this we need to say this, you know, and we need to," the way just seemed to open up. And it hasn't been an easy journey for us. We, you know, we put one foot, one day at a time, you know, one step at a time. But we've the way that World Council for Health has grown is really from the bottom up, with lots of people contributing. So we've had the most amazing people join on the journey, and that's also very you know, encouraging and inspiring. So you start to surround yourself with people who have great energy, and that, you know, keeps you know, you sort of yeah, that positive energy keeps one going.
Yeah, because back then it was the forces, like you said, were intense. Anything that deviated from whatever the mainstream had decided, you couldn't question, even with your own data and so forth. It was something else. Again, my attitude is do what you want. It's your body, but let's have options so you can make up your own mind and make an educated guess. You know, if we know our bodies, that's, you know, half of the battle. And like we talked, meditation, I Ching, understanding who we are. But you also had some breakthroughs, and I would say maybe angels that came at the right time. Your book is endorsed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Tell us, that when did he become interested in your work? Tell the audience about that.
We were connected in sort of mid 2021, because he was looking, you know, he was working for Children's Health Defense, and he was interested. They were looking at the medicines that were being suppressed, like hydroxychloroquine and IV, and he wanted to know more about the evidence. Obviously, me as an ex-WHO consultant and having contributed to that review, so we met a few times with he had a group of lawyers working on it as well, and he ended up, obviously I showed him the video of the meeting that I had with Dr. Andrew Hill, and he
Mhm.
asked if he could use that in his book, because he was writing The Real Anthony Fauci at the time. So
Mhm.
he wrote that, he added that, used my transcript of the meeting in his book, and then we kept contact, and in 2022, we held the first in-person conference for, everybody had been locked down for the 8 months. There'd been no medical conferences, no conferences, in-person meetings. And we held the first in-person Better Way conference, we called it, in 2022. And he spoke at that, but via video. And then he also spoke again in 2023. So we'd sort of kept in contact. And then I asked if he could endorse the book. So he hasn't read it, I have to say, but it's great to have the vote of confidence and the testimony. And
indeed. Well,
very, very much
sure
appreciate
he's
that.
very busy doing whatever he's doing. And at the same time, too, there was that instance, was it late in 2021, that famous episode with Joe Rogan where he got sick and then he had that video, I think, in the back of his house in his yard, and he just started talking about, well, this is what I tried, and I feel a little better. And he mentioned Ivor, and oh my God, the firestorm was it was
Yes.
brutal against him and against anybody. Tell us, you weren't able to get on the show, but it probably brought light to your movement.
Well, I wasn't sure really whether that did us favors or not, because it just sort of added to the controversy. And I did wonder, being interviewed was very difficult. And I know we were being censored. I was being censored a lot, and maybe people were afraid to have me on. But certainly people like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand and other big names stayed well clear of us, even when we were the experts on bringing forward the information on the World Health Organization's power grab. What's happening with this concentration of power and this globalist agenda and manifesting a one world government outside, through the UN structures. And so, we were experts on a number of different things. Because we're a grassroots organization, we have all this information coming in from different countries and from different grassroots organizations. So it was disappointing that these big influences stayed away from us. And they would often interview people who had interviewed us and were quoting. So, for example, Russell Brand interviewed John Campbell, and John Campbell he's a YouTube influencer as well, and I had educated John Campbell about IV and all of that, and then so and the same with the WHO issues. So it has been interesting how we've been avoided, how we've sort of been marginalized, and my ex followers go down, not up. It's sort of this constant sort of trimming of the views and whatever. So we are very, very shadow banned, which is why we really depend on or grateful for our subscribers, our newsletter subscribers, and the Substacks and all of that. And certainly we're funded by by donations and monthly subscriptions. And so we have no great big funders. I know people often think that we get these emails occasionally with people saying, for the World Council for Health should be doing X, Y, and Z, and and we expect this and that. But I think often we pack a punch bigger than we punch. What do you say? You punch above your weight, kind of thing. And I think sometimes we may appear that way.
Well, look at your Substack. You have like 36,000 subscribers. I'm like, whoa, you're no small blogger. You know what I mean? Small blogger about cooking, or you've got quite a following.
Yes, well, the Substack is great, and we have, a lot of people subscribe to our newsletters. But in terms of what we are trying to do, like our core message is really self empowerment, self control, and You speak about this as well, Miguel, how it's really about doing the inner work, and you were also saying, about evil, and one sees it over and over again in the movement because how difficult it is for people to work together. So you can get groups agreeing on something, and then they'll go so far, and then suddenly everything falls apart because there's conflict, and it's so easy to create conflict. You just have to poke a wound, a collective wound, and we have these collective wounds all over the world, and they just know exactly what to do. They poke that, and the next thing, groups fracture and all of that. So we're very easy to control and divide. And so even when you can sort of get things to work, and you can have a really small harmonious team, these collective traumas can be triggered and cause division, and so it is very much about taking things back to yourself and thinking, why does that hurt? Why am I reacting this way? Why do I feel so emotional? And that's really a sign that the war is in each of us. Like, we are fractals of the greater war, and the evil is in all of us, and we're constantly having to fight. It is a personal battle, of good over evil, constantly trying to get rid of all of those things that trigger us and the traumas. So that we can be useful, and work together for human being and for mankind, and not for the globalists.
Yeah, that's how they win. Divide and conquer, sending bad agents to poison the well. Yeah, I mean, these tactics have been used for tens of thousands of years. And of course, there's been many pandemics. As somebody who reads history, these have happened, and it shows who are the heroes, who are the ones who want something different, a better way, things to improve, and so forth. So I'm very happy that you're doing the work and what you've done. I am very grateful for what you've done and your organization. And I remember there's the tweet, and you mentioned this tweet, and that's from the US FDA. I think it was after Rogan, and it said, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it." And I remember thinking, this is brilliant in a very insidious ways, because it hits all the right. It's like a spell, like comparing this is medicine just for animals, even though I'm not a scientist, but I'd read that it'd been used by human beings for a long time and saved tens of, maybe hundreds of thousands of lives, human lives. And the y'all, that's like saying, you're a hick if you even consider this. The y'all was brilliant. So that was one of the magic spells you had to contend with, right, Tess?
Yes, yeah, it definitely, that had a major impact, and then of course years later, some doctors took the FDA to court, and they had to retract that tweet. But the damage was done. It was highly effective to keep people away from IV, and I mean, it was crazy that you could. That people would be so they could be on their deathbed and they wouldn't take it, or you would have people on their deathbed and they wouldn't give it to their loved ones because they had, obviously been so impacted by the propaganda. It was really astonishing. But I do talk about one event in the book where we had I had a husband call me from he lived about 3 or 4 hours away, and his wife was in hospital in ICU, and they were threatening to put her on a ventilator, and she knew if she went on the ventilator she wouldn't come off it again. Yeah. And she was absolutely determined not to go on the ventilator, even though her oxygen sats were very, very low, and the doctor was saying, "You're going to die if you don't go on it." She was really sort of being, bullied and chastised. And he took some ivermectin to her, and it got confiscated. So even though she was sort of on her deathbed, they were saying they wouldn't let her have it. And so he drove up to see me, and as a friend, I gave him some. I'm not clinically practicing, and I gave him some and suggested he put it in some chocolate and he melted some chocolate and he smuggled it. The hospitals are so unhealthy that they will let you receive chocolate. They would let you have sweets or something really bad for you, unhealthy and sugary, but they wouldn't let you have something useful like vitamin C or D or the things that he had been trying to get to her, or the IV. So she received the chocolate. She took some of the chocolate, and well, I hope you'll read the story to find out what happened. But that was really a wonderful experience for me to see, after looking at all the data all that time. It was a wonderful experience for me to see that it really helped somebody.
Yeah, and there's also the time you were at the conference, the Bath conference, the BRLSI. That's the one that later investigated you, and it was just they had nothing to stand on. But so a gentleman called in in a Zoom, just like, "You're killing people," just ranting and raving. And Tess, I empathize with people, because I know once fear gets you, it's the old Dune, fear is the mind killer. Once that fear gets into you, you become irrational. I mean, sometimes in my life, that little fear will get into about my children or a situation in my town, and I become this monster. I try to, get rid of the fear first before I start projecting. But I empathize with that man and with a lot of people, didn't you? They were just afraid.
Yes,
Nobody wanted.
yes. Everybody was made to be terrified of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up doing the work for them. We end up doing the work for the globalists for them, by policing one another and ostracizing one another. And so, I think what was really interesting for me writing the book with the I Ching was the commentary on conduct, basically, and just bringing everything back to conduct. And it's sort of an objective analysis of individual conduct during, and because what I did was I didn't just look at, for example, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson or other prominent figures. I looked at who, for example, I was investigated by the General Medical Council for giving a lecture about the science on the COVID crisis, and so the General Medical Council has investigating officers, so there's just some random investigating officer with a name who emails you to say you're under investigation, and you respond and say, well, what is it for, and this, and so just getting commentary from the I Ching on that guy, for example, like what is his thinking? There he is, taking doctors to task. He's not a doctor himself. He hasn't taken a Hippocratic oath. Why does he send those letters and on behalf of this system that's breaching patient trust and coming down on doctors who are ethical doctors? So so just looking at things like that, and the people that were responding to the emails which when we sent to the therapeutics task force, who were supposed to be looking into COVID, or the regulatory agencies that were just ignoring us, or the head of Operation Warp Speed, like Dr. Nancy Woodcock, all of these individuals who were blocking things, but also those doing great things, like those individuals who were writing letters or standing up and treading on the tail of the tiger every day, with or sending things to their politicians, or or doctors trying to share the word. So all of those activities done by ordinary folk like us,
Right.
just just trying to make a positive difference. And so it was really lovely to get commentary on them and celebrate them as well, and all the mothers who've been, all the mothers and the older women, the grandmothers who've been at all these meetings trying to help. And so as I say, the book is really, I think if I was to sum it up in a nutshell, I'd say it's about conduct and a sort of evaluation of conduct in a particular time period, which everybody can identify with because we all went through it.
Yeah, I would say so too. I would describe it as a balance between the spiritual or the noetic and the scientific. Those are your great weapons. And I think for any healthcare, that is the way through. Like you said, there is the spiritual or the unconscious, and there's the material. Both are valid, both have insights, but when they're together, I think that brings about a better healthcare and a better state of mind, and helps with things like fear. Like you said, people were turning on each other. It's the old secret of the Soviet Union, Tess, where Lenin and Stalin did not have the firepower, the technology to control this massive group of countries. They didn't. So what did they do? They made sure that it was the citizens who turned each other in. That's who mostly turned each other in to go to the gulags. So you have that power to do it. And it was kind of alien for me because I'd watch like Boris Johnson saying Christmas is canceled. And like, how can you do that's? Like the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, when the sheriff of Nottingham goes, Christmas is canceled, just to be a jerk. But here in the United States, obviously, the state governments could only give suggestions. They could say, don't have more than 5 people, but they couldn't enforce it because of the laws of the land. But I hope I didn't go too much on a tangent. But just saying, I think that's the key of your book, is the spiritual and the material. That's how we win the game and stay healthy.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's I feel really excited about with the book, just like you were saying earlier, when you have, when you check the I Ching and you get something, and then you get others to check it for you as well.
Yeah.
I think the possibilities in terms of deciding what's true and what's fake open up in that way. And I have an idea that we could actually create a game of trust. We could play a game of trust, where we could triangulate things and say, okay, let's ask this question, and compare notes, and see if we can work out what's going on and what the truth is on the specific thing and explore it. Because the nice thing about the I Ching is you can ask a question and then you can dig it a bit deeper, or ask it in slightly different, and you can actually explore it. And it's especially useful in these circumstances where we don't really know what's happening. We don't, and we don't know who to trust, and we might be meeting new people every day, and you don't, all the movements are infiltrated as well, so it certainly is a useful way of gaining further insights into things, into situations, and even individuals, and then triangulating it amongst other people who are also using it, and seeing, can we actually get a consensus using our ancient co-authors,
Right.
support. Because if you think potentially what this could mean is that we all have access to this collective consciousness, and there might be a way of of even coordinating activities, or something, if things get more difficult. So I think that the possibilities are endless, and I look forward to having lots of conversations with people to see how we can use this potential as a game of trust, which obviously is a game of trust, because if you ask a question, you really should follow the advice that comes, So I think you could ask a question and say, okay, I'm going to suspend disbelief now, and I'm going to do whatever I'm told. And I think that's quite a fun way of playing this game that we're in, because it then overrides the fear and the questioning. No, I don't think I should do that because of X, Y, Z. And if one can say, no, I'm going to enter a new phase where I actually, let the universe push me around a little bit and give me some guidance. And I'm going to suspend disbelief because I can't believe this really works. I don't know how it works. And it's all too strange and foreign and, 3,000 years old in China, whatever the prejudices you have to actually using it. If you just think, actually, perhaps it's a game and I can play this game and just trust that the answer I get is going to be useful and I'm going to do it. I think it's very empowering, and I hope people will give it a try.
I think they should. It's the old Hindu axiom: life is a game that must be played but cannot be won. You enjoy the game because you're in it. You make the illusion the best possible illusion that you can have. So, and you use the Richard Wilhelm book. That's the one you use when you do your drawings?
Yes. I mean, I love this book, the Richard Wilhelm one. And I was never much into literature when I was a young person. But the metaphor makes sense to me in this. But I know it's not for everybody. Some people prefer, there are other versions and they prefer a much simpler answer. And, I think they can all be used together. In the book, I quite like the way that you might not necessarily get it. You might not, you might say, oh, I wonder what that means, because I haven't interpreted everything. I've said, I asked my co-authors and this is what they said, and and I've popped in the quote in italics, but it is linked to the hexagram and the lines, so people can pick up whatever book they use, whatever version they use, and get another reading. And I think it will be very interesting to do that, and obviously for people to interpret what they think the line is saying about the event or incident or individual.
Makes sense. Well, as we get to the end, Graham, do you have any last question or remark for Tess?
The only one I can think of is I've always considered Fauci sort of the Zahi Hawass of virology. He's kind of underwhelmed me since I first heard of him, when he took over the AIDS crisis back in the 80s. And I always saw putting him in charge was a big mistake. Tess, what do you think should have happened instead? What would a sober and sane mind have done to handle the crisis? How should it have been handled?
Well, clearly it was a man-made crisis, well, a manufactured crisis. And so it only existed because because of the agenda to create this new world order, one world government where we are the product, and we need to be controlled and through fear. So I'm sure you are aware of the the synergy between the injections and the frequency and nanotech. So these two things together are instruments of control, and it's about diminishing the human being. The transhumanist agenda, getting people, to be merged with technology so that they can be diminished as human beings and controlled. So that's the agenda, and Fauci is very much a part of that, an instrument of that, or an architect of that. And I think it's pretty clear in Robert F. Kennedy's book that he should be in prison at the very least. Well, not at the very least, but that he should be brought to justice, and hopefully that will occur.
Yeah. I'd be happy if people didn't see him as a hero.
It is extraordinary. It is extraordinary. I know we have to go, but it is funny how that many of these real villains are seen as celebrities in the eyes of the public.
Oh, it's something else. But again, tale as old as time. We've been doing that forever. It's yeah, part of the simulation and the control system we live in that has always existed. So yes, looks like my cat is telling me that we have reached our time. Usually when she wants to leave, but yes, for the audience, so much more in Game of Trust, from the scientific to the mystical to intuition to so many great stories of the with the as of the umbrella, the grand narration of Tess's work to bring about more truths into the world. And yes, we have her website in the show notes. Please support Aeon Byte in any way you can. I wouldn't be surprised if this video was taken away on a certain platform that we are now. So you can always find it on my Patreon or other places or on the podcast providers. Again, get the virtual Alexandria for 50% off with the code Elvis. And yes, thanks for those of you who showed up and who support this show on a weekly basis. I guess I'll say, Graham, thanks for keeping us company.
Always a pleasure, and it was great, Tess. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor, and I just wanted to say a last word to your audience, and that is, that our conduct is important, and it's really important to get active at this time.
It is. Take over your body, take over your life. Your body has more wisdom than all the medical experts out there because it knows what it needs. And that's it. It's part of the self-knowledge. Well, Tess, thank you very much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed talking to you as I knew I would, as much as I enjoyed your book. And keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting the good fight.
Thanks. You too, Miguel. You keep doing what you're doing. I love your show.
I shall. For everybody else, yeah, have a good rest of your day. And as I always say, 10, write your own gospel, live your own myth. Take care, everybody.